Hi, all. Welcome to yet another Koot podcast series where we discuss global tech adoption trends, global SaaS adoption trends with global industry leaders. And today, we have a very special guest, very interesting guest, whom I look upon as my mentor, Ashton Monazo from Google. He is profoundly knowledgeable, yet so humble. Um, he is currently serving as enterprise architect at Google. If you are the one from enterprise or startups who's navigating through the innovation and the AI and the Gen AI endeavor, then this podcast is a must watch. I'm really looking forward to learn a lot from Ashton. Let's welcome Ashton. Hi, Ashton. Thank you so much for taking out time and scheduling despite your busy schedule and travel. Thanks again. I'm sure the conversation that we're going to have today going to profoundly benefit our audience, Ashton.
Wonderful. Hi, and hello to everyone who'll be listening to this podcast in whatever time zone you're going to be. I'm very excited to be here, honored to have this chance to share my thoughts and some of my observations with you in this series. So thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Ashton. Let's start, Ashton, with your current role at Google. And I know you were also an chief architect at Flexera, and a brief your career journey, Ashton.
Absolutely. So my career, even before it was an official career, when I was still at school, and I would do side businesses and create side opportunities for myself. I've always been very passionate about learning around innovation, technology, whether it was hardware, software, biological systems, even some of the more logical, financial and legal systems. To
Yeah.
me, it's all very interrelated. So that has been my journey for the last many years. And what I try to do is I try to bring all those bits and pieces from those different domains in order to come up with new ways of solving some new, but also some very old problems, and seeing which models are the most useful for solving something that really needs to be refined or improved upon or optimized.
Sure, Ashton. No, even I have gone through profile and I saw the transformation from biotech, then legal, and then IT. That's that's so versatile, Ashton. Now, when you remember when we spoke last time, you've always, spoken about the remarkable achievements of India, especially in the space programs. So, according to you, how India is able to position itself so uniquely innovative despite all the odds, Ashton?
Absolutely. So there's a concept that is called frugal innovation or the frugal innovation philosophy. And I recall reading a book about it. I think it was called Frugal Innovation: How to Do Better for with Less. And it was published approximately 10 years ago. And I found it to be profoundly meaningful and relevant, especially when we see that Mongolian was able to achieve with roughly 70, $3 or $4 million, something equivalent to NASA's Maven project, which was well in the 600 of 650 or 660 or $670 million range. So almost 10 times the amount of investment that was made on the Mongolian project. So that concept of frugal innovation is a very powerful one, and I think it comes from the concept of jugaad. Jugaad to systematic innovation, which is solving problems at a very simple scale, but showing time to value, showing that we can quickly have some makeshift solutions that are going to solve a problem and then engineer them to scale. So then they can be apply to a much larger domain or even more fundamental challenges within the same area of solutioning. So that type of a mindset and philosophical approach to innovation is quite powerful, and I think should be credited with some of the other concepts like UPI processing, 100 billion plus transactions every year. And these are some of the very impressive infrastructural leapfrogging that can be demonstrated, again, doing it at, with a very budget conscious and an optimized mindset, not being wasteful. So I think that's potentially one pillar. And I'm sure as we'll go through this podcast, we'll come up with some of the other ones that would be relevant to this concept.
Absolutely. Now that takes next question. When it comes to, you also, vouch for the hardware talent in India. So I think, everyone is in the rush of AI and GenAI, Ashton, but you emphasize that, there's a great hardware engineering talent in India, which the global enterprise, or even the startups in India for that matter, are overlooking. So what is that hardware potential in India, Ashton?
Great question. So and by the way, I started with hardware as a kid.
Okay.
I got into hardware when I was in elementary school, and I absolutely fell in love with it. But hardware is hard, right? It's a lot easier to get that instant gratification by throwing some code together. But having, sustainable, functional, correct and complete hardware is very difficult. And it's very difficult if you don't have some of the fundamentals within the educational system and within
Yeah.
the mindset. And the good news for India is the first principles thinking construct that is very much embedded in the educational system is quite a blessing here, because having that deep mathematical foundation is what's required to be able to innovate in the hardware space and bring cross-domain expertise from science and engineering and across the gambit in order to develop highly cost-effective, highly functional, again, going with that concept of jugaad in mind, to solve immediate problems with a type of hardware that can then scale. Right. And right now, there's a massive global shortage of that type of talent and that type of development, right? We can see that there are only a handful of entities and even fewer countries that really have the know-how to be able to innovate around sophisticated or even just, functional, capable hardware. So I see a massive opportunity there in terms of the Indian scientists and mathematicians and innovators and entrepreneurs to really start approaching the critical gaps that could be addressed through innovation in hardware on the edge devices that can be then interconnected and solve really big problems at scale globally.
Absolutely, Ash. I can really connect because I was a robotics teacher before this venture, and I used to teach robotics across the globe. And one of my students came up with a brilliant idea of a mini washing machine which can wash the, kids, babies, cloth diapers, environmental friendly. But when we had to go through the design, the mold and the functionality, it costs a bomb, right? And then again, like you mentioned, the jugaad, we purchased a Chinese mini washing machine. We did our, drilling, and we fixed our motor. So that's the constraint, right? I mean, Ashton. So despite all this, high risk and high investment involved in the hardware innovation, how do you think that the startups or can navigate and can really make the use of this opportunity? Because I rightly get, the even the GCCs or the enterprise carbon net zero is their next aim. They want to get their operations sustainable. So amidst this chaos, how do you think they should make the best use of the opportunity, Ashton?
And that chaos is exactly the opportunity, right? Because that chaos is a global scale chaos and needs that are not being fully satisfied, and they haven't been satisfied for a number of years, right? If you look at how much innovation could still go into mechanical actuators, since you mentioned robotics, one of the key components of having electrical and mechanical actuators to enable a better class of robots. Not everything has to be software, and in fact, not everything should be software. There's so much innovation that could be built into the material that are low cost, high resilience, effective, and they can become widely available, right? And so from that perspective, I think there's tremendous opportunity for India to look at the entire supply chain for building critical items. And a critical item could be exactly those, a very cost-effective and locally sourced washing machine that any household can get, or even make it even portable so you can carry it with you and take it to different places as needed. And those types of items can then be designed with the entire vertical supply chain in mind, in terms of the raw material that should be used for that thing, all the way down to its recycling and disposal or repurposing for some other use when its useful lifetime is over. But it has to be thought through from a completely innovative approach, right? It's really great to reverse engineer something that's already done to kind of see how it works. But then it's not great to reverse engineer just for the purpose of trying to replicate the exact same thing, right? Good innovation doesn't happen that way. Instead, I would look at it and say, look, we decompose this alternative here. Now, how do we create something with similar functionality, but leveraging the types of material and supply chain and constraints that we have locally, and around that try to design it and build it. There are so many examples of constraints and limitations driving and creating that necessity creates that innovation. So I think this is a really great opportunity to say to your students, how do we build this in, but build it from scratch? How do we build a washing machine that we could source 100% locally? And even if those suppliers are not here today, how do we get into like 3D printing those items? So then we can actually build them very quickly, and you don't need to be dependent on expensive or not readily available bill of materials.
Sure, Ashton. Very interesting. You preempted my question, which I was about to ask about the 3D printers, right? I think students are mostly in engineering colleges. They are trying to figure out the 3D printers for anything and
Yeah.
everything. And I think we also spoke when we were discussing last time. So, according to you, where do you see the current scenario? Of course, 3D printers are going to have an impact on healthcare, food, and I recently came across the food, 3D printing for proteins. So, which are the sectors that you see that it can be impactful, Ashton?
I think the next major disruption that needs to happen is in the construction industry. We've been building buildings, and whether they're homes or offices or storage or whatever it is, warehouses, pretty much more or less the same way for decades, if not centuries, right? And there is a global shortage on construction material, the know-how, and it is really due time to evolve that entire ecosystem. What better place to lead that revolution than India that has such a large population, right?
Mm.
So if we can think of um, innovative ways to use 3D, and there are companies, there are a number of companies globally that are experimenting, even have prioritized 3D printers for construction,
Yeah.
right? But I think a lot of them have different challenges that they're still not ready to be mass consumable, right? You and I are probably not going to be able to get one of those to build a garage in our house, or build a separate living unit, or
Yeah.
add some sort of a construction. Just not accessible at this point. It's a
Yeah.
very feasible but not readily available. And I would encourage um, innovators and entrepreneurs in India to really start thinking about that. We finally have a couple of companies coming out of China that have produced the equivalent of the personal computer for 3D printing. Until a few years ago, when these two companies came along, 3D printing was really for the hobbyist. And I remember having many prototypes at home,
Yeah.
and it's kind of a frustrating experience. If you're not an engineer, if you really don't love to tinker, it's a very frustrating experience to not get consistent results when you're trying to create something, and you don't want to spend all your time just creating prototypes. You actually want the thing to work so you can use those parts to build something else. So finally, that came to the consumer market a couple of years ago, where there are these, plastic-based 3D printers that can almost flawlessly print, if as long as you have a good model that you feed them. So that's great,
Yeah.
but that's still very much focused on more of the hobbyist. Now imagine if the entrepreneurs in India really put their focus on building the equivalents, but for printing out components for medical devices,
Yeah.
right? For agricultural tools. So if there's something breaks, so if there's a need to, do something in agriculture a slightly different way, you can immediately, iterate on it. You can come up with a few dozen ideas, create several hundred prototypes. Most will not work, but a few could be complete game
Amazing.
changers.
Yeah.
And if you have the ability to generate those artifacts very quickly and cost effectively, then everyone can start innovating as long as they have a good idea, right? So you mentioned food systems. I think that's absolutely a great segue into how we can introduce some very cool concepts, not just we're not just talking about, like, baking cakes through 3D printers, right? We're also talking about getting constituents and creating custom-made, ready-to-order nutritional packs that have all the different ingredients that a person would want, basically 3D printed. So you can think about the medical applications of that for health and fitness and so on and so forth, for hospitals,
Mm.
for emergency situations. So
Mm.
that's game changing.
This
And
is-
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Of
No, this
course,
is
no,
that
please.
one interesting food-based 3D printer that you have come across, Ash.
I'm looking mostly at some really interesting prototypes. I saw an interesting prototype by a French company that was doing very sophisticated pastries, and you know um, it's very artistic and just beautifully done. And I personally love to cook and bake, and I know how much effort that would have taken, how much expertise that would have taken for someone to do it manually, to learn how to do it.
Mm.
It's not simple, but if you have, a culinary 3D printer somewhere, or that could even be a business where you walk in and you kind of custom order your particular treats for special occasions, and
Yeah,
that just supplied. But that requires a lot of experimentation, right?
sure.
And India has such a rich culture around food and culinary arts. Again, I think it would be a really great fit
Yeah.
for that level of experimentation as well.
I am able to recollect, the roti maker and the dosa printers equivalent of
That'd be wonderful, yeah. Oh, if you created, I would like to be the first
Oh.
to test it out and buy
It's
it and
already
invest
there
in.
in the market, Ashton, but it's not
Okay.
that it is in everyone's, in
Yeah.
everyone's household, because still the mothers here, they still feel like, cooking with their own hands for the kids. So that psychology is still there in India. But
Got you. Yeah.
having said that, I should also like to, understand from you, which country are you observing? Are they really, kind of going forth and, as a leader in this hardware, especially in the 3D printing, according to you, Ashton?
So it depends on the industrial side. I know a few U.S.-based companies that do metal material printing and really industrial grade, high quality items, and I believe there are also several in Europe that I've heard about. I haven't looked into too many of their products. On the construction side, there were a few companies that were making the news headlines, but the one that I have seen their work is based out of Austin, Texas,
Okay.
and they have a very sophisticated set of products and raw material and so forth. But again, the challenge is um, building a 3D printer that could look at what is available locally and turn that into a raw material, right? So if you're trying to 3D print construction, buildings for, let's say, growing food indoors, or for protecting crops, or for people to live in there, or office spaces, or hospitals, or whatever it is, you probably want to reduce shipping supplies and raw material in. So it would be great
Yeah.
to have the innovation to say, we have, several dozen formulas that this 3D printer can consume and print things out. And depending on the different geographical locations within, let's say, India, um, if we're going to build stuff in this region, then we can start using what's already locally available cost effectively without harming the environment, causing, scarring to the ecosystem and damage,
Yeah.
and and and
Sure.
reduce the barrier to entry, if you will. And which
Sure.
also means when you do that, your overall total cost, total cost of ownership goes down, and the energy consumption goes down. And energy is, whether it's for transportation or for producing raw material, or in whatever shape or form, is going to continue to be a major global challenge that we're still trying to solve.
Sure, sure, Ashton. Slightly shifting the gears, Ashton. We also spoke about brain drain, right? And despite all this constraint and with limited resources, the Indian tech talent is doing whatever is feasible, and with as you mentioned, with the Jugaad. How can we stop sending our talented engineers out of India? How can we retain them? How should be the systems in India, so that we can retain, and we can work efficiently as you mentioned about the US and the French, or such kind of markets, Ashton.
That's a very complex
Sorry, I don't
construct,
want to
and
put you in spot.
no, not at all, not at all. I would share my limited, if you will, observations, but in order for me to give you a much better answer, I would need to actually live in India, and maybe even be involved in building businesses, and helping entrepreneurs, and teaching students and so forth, at least in multiple regions. And India is a very diverse place, and it's a very diverse ecosystem. So in different representative pockets, I would need to spend some time. So short of that, the answer I'm going to give may seem rather superficial, and maybe not deep enough, but I'm just going to talk about high level in terms of what would require an ecosystem that could be self-sustaining and very healthy and active to be built. So one is the developmental ecosystem, and that requires creating local networks of dedicated mentors, investors, successful entrepreneurs, and these mentors and investors and success entrepreneurs need to be very symbiotic, almost super symbiotic. Because one of the challenge of an ecosystem that's not symbiotic and it becomes parasitic is someone with a great idea and a great prototype may go out there, but immediately the ideas may get stolen, or they may be buried under layers and layers of bureaucracy. And that's typically what's causing brain drain globally, right? If somebody leaves their homeland to go somewhere else, it's usually because they want to make sure that they can execute on their dreams and opportunities. Now, there is definitely a benefit to having a lot of great talent, Indian talent outside of India, which is having that cross-domain exposure,
Yeah.
right? Really understanding global perspectives and global needs. So if that entrepreneur then comes and innovates in India,
Yeah.
they are probably innovating with a global lens in mind, not just a
Yeah.
local lens. So very likely they're solving global problems. Then the other thing is the research infrastructure. And I was in Bangalore last year where we spoke,
Yeah.
and part of the conversations I was having with some of the industry leaders and representatives was around really investing in R&D facilities
Mm.
and invest in them in a very generous way. Be very generous in terms of uh, feeding that spark, right? There are tons of great people with tons of great ideas. If you have the ability to provide an ecosystem for them to constantly try different things and innovate, and then be given credit, be given protection for the innovation as well through IP protection, or streamlining business registration processes, access to international markets through a combination of industry and government help with regulatory support and so forth. All of those then create this culture of innovation and entrepreneurship going forward. And there's also a culture shift that I've been observing in India as well, where the younger generation that I had the pleasure of speaking with, they were risk takers, right? And they were not afraid of failing in front of friends and family as long as they were pursuing their passion. And I think that
Mm.
is absolutely a required ingredient. Most entrepreneurs fail thousands of times in the eyes of others, but in their own eyes, it's not failure, it's education. They're learning because every time they do
Mm.
something that doesn't work out, they're going to iterate on it. So that culture shift is very important. That if somebody's not following the traditional paths, but they're out there pursuing their dreams in trying to create something to make the world better, um,
Mm.
that should be encouraged. That should be supported, right?
Yeah, sure. No, wonderfully said. Your especially the analogy of symbiotic versus the parasite, wonderfully put. And I am able to recollect Ashton, and I'm able to agree with you because now the Gen Zs which are coming up, they have a clear idea as to why they have to join, and there are a lot of reverse questions which are asked to the interviewer about the ESG, or the particular the overall the work that they'll be doing. So they're very particular about it. That's a shift that is definitely happening, Ashton. And apart from
Yeah.
that, even you're right, the R&D is shifting in India, and many like Zeno for that matter, their next vision to attract a lot of global roles in India. So yeah, I think rightly said. And let's see. I mean, the future is where India playing the pivotal role is. I think it's in the near future, Ashton.
Absolutely. And along those, one of the biggest challenges we have globally is production of energy, right? As we see with the AI race that's going on,
Yeah.
we need even more power. We need even more energy. And yes, perhaps coal fusion is on the horizon, but we kind of need a lot of sustainable energy now, right?
Mhm.
And the most abundant um, atom in the universe is supposed to be hydrogen. So,
Yeah.
how wonderful would it be for a lot of great innovation coming in terms of sustainable hydrogen production in India, which can then not
Mhm.
only surpass the local needs for creating very clean and sustainable hydrogen ecosystem, but also export it. And there's another country already doing that, making a lot of investment into, I mean, they haven't started exporting as far as I know, but they really have put a lot of investment into it, and that's Saudi Arabia, where the last few years they're building
Okay.
one of the most impressive hydrogen fuel cell, generation and production supplies to diversify from petroleum, which is an absolute must, right? And so along those lines, I happen to have a hydrogen vehicle, which is challenging to get it fueled in most parts of the world. It just happened to live in the sliver of the universe that we have a number of hydrogen fuel stations. And every time I stop my car, it shows me how many kilograms of pollutants is removed from the air and how many, some of the greenhouse gases that we concern, in addition to pollutants, have been removed through this vehicle every time it's driving around. And the output is pure water, H2O, which with a bit of a creativity that could actually be recaptured from the equivalent to the exhaust pipe of the car and be recycled as water source, right? So if we get to a point where Indian entrepreneurs and innovators make hydrogen engine, hydrogen fuel technology highly affordable, highly scalable, and universal, and export it, now you can imagine that your house, your data centers, your office, your vehicle, your appliances, everything could now be powered by something that's producing water as its byproduct. And we also have a water shortage, by the way, right?
By the way.
So yeah, so it becomes a very interesting and highly impactful, I think, innovation. But not too many countries right now. I mean, a lot of countries are focused on other forms of power generations through electrovoltaic cells, the solar systems, or wind capture, or um, nuclear power, or petroleum based. But it would be, again, amazing if a place like India really puts a massive focus in terms of sustainable, clean, green hydrogen production through innovation.
Sure, Ashton. Other than Saudi Arabia, which are the other countries where you see tremendous research is going on sustainable energy, Ashton?
I've seen some really great papers come in from Brazil and from Australia, especially around hydrogen production.
Okay.
Not too long ago, I read a paper about university research where they would just be able to feed like dirty water, quote unquote, without any extra filtering process into a very sustainable prototype that they created. And this, ocean type of water would go in, and the output would be oxygen atoms and hydrogen atoms. And of course, clean water is also a byproduct, right? So something, and there have been a number of innovations like this for decades that we've heard about, but the challenge is no industry and no nation has really taken it on to scale that, to bring into production at scale. So that's one of those things that requires a significant amount of government involvement, encouragement, investment, but it solves a massive problem, right? Now you have, a good amount of clean supply of water for whatever purpose, right? For irrigation, for human consumption, and so on and so forth. Now we also have the energy that goes along with that, and et cetera, et cetera. Now, I've heard a lot of counter arguments by some very famous and powerful people against hydrogen. And I think some of that should also be taken into account. But again, that's why we innovate, right? We take a set of reasons why something is not traditionally done. And again, through that fundamental problem solving thinking that we mentioned earlier, which is the first principle thinking type of mindset, we don't just follow the established and the presumed assumptions, and we disrupt those by finding new ways of innovating around those constraints and obstacles.
Yeah.
And then you can go to market with something like hydrogen that is, highly attainable, and it could potentially be safely even exportable globally.
No, wonderfully put, Ashton. Actually, I was about to ask, which is the sustainable energy which excites you the most, and it looks like it's the hydrogen fuel. And moving on to now, AI and the Gen AI, right? When we spoke last time, you mentioned AI is a knife. It can be powerful at the same time dangerous. So, can you explain this analogy? And currently, globally, the enterprises or the startups, what are the initial mistakes, or how are they taking the AI wrongly, Ashton?
Absolutely, and that was the main topic of my keynote last year at the event in Bangalore, right?
Yeah.
So from my perspective, the 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 type of AI that has really shown promise in terms of automation and solving problems, and helping humans connect better, and
Yeah.
translate, and so on and so forth. That type of AI is very powerful, just like a very sharp surgical instrument or a knife would be, right? It's a tool. It's like a power tool. It allows you to do things better, faster, more efficiently. However, it does require training and know-how in terms of using it for the right purpose, because you can use a sharp object incorrectly and it becomes a liability more than it is a wonderful tool, right? And some of the concerns that are being raised around AI, for instance, is, and I'm not talking about like the cybersecurity hacking or some illicit use or any of that. I'm just talking about an actual,
Mm.
completely legal and compliant use, is people not trying as hard as they would. And there are plenty of examples around that. There was a time where all of us could navigate by reading maps, right? Before before every car and every phone had a great map on it, right?
Yeah.
And in some ways, that's wonderful, because now, because we have the convenience of maps, we're able to go explore and get to destinations faster and kind of optimize our paths.
Yeah.
But we also lost the skill set of being able to read maps and navigate. And then if you probably go back even a few decades prior to that, maybe there was a time that more and more people knew how to navigate by looking at the scars, or stars, or the
Yeah.
sky, or
Mm.
landmarks, right? So it's really easy to lose certain skill set if we don't constantly practice them. And I think what we need to be conscientious of is AI can really help us not do certain tasks that we consider not to be a good use of our time, right?
Yeah.
We want to optimize around it. But we should also make sure that we still don't lose the ability to do some of those things that have helped us be more intelligent, be better critical thinkers, and have more empathy, and so on and so forth. Hence the analogy of a knife, right? If
Sure.
used properly, it's a wonderful tool.
Sure, sure, Ashton. And like we mentioned in, one of the events where I had been, one of a very, leading VC investor, he mentioned that, the how AI is looked upon in global outside India and versus India, right? Globally, unfortunately, they are the discussion itself is how to cut costs using AI. However, in India, how to scale using AI. So that is the discussion. And AI is commoditized; it's everywhere. So how to use it efficiently, Ashton?
I think probably the easiest analogy you can think of is if you think of AI as power tools, right? Um, if you go back maybe 500 or 600 years, um, for the previous millennia, we had people who were building great things, right? If you were building furniture or some transportation device or weapons, whatever it was that was being built, we were using tools. But those tools did not, for the most part, didn't have gears and didn't have means of automation. But then you fast forward within the last few hundred years, and I'm just going to take the case of a screwdriver. As far as I know, the first evidence of modern screws are from the 15th century, give or take.
Yeah.
And so, and a screw was created because it has better qualities and superior to a nail, whether it's a wooden nail or metal nail or whatever. But the device to drive that screw initially was just the typical manual screw, right? And then we invented things that you could crank a bunch of gears and this thing would spin and go faster. And then fast forward to the post electricity invention, then we had
Yeah.
electrical
Motors.
screwdrivers. And yes, and then today we've had cordless now, and better and lighter and stronger cordless screwdrivers for the last 2 decades or so. The screwdriver has not eliminated the need for artisans or the ability to know how to put the screws together and build something, right? That is a fundamental skill set that one still needs to acquire. But what the screwdriver, the manual one, versus the best of the power tools have is the ability to, if you know what you're doing, the ability to do that thing much faster and more consistently and more efficiently with less harm to yourself. So if you look at AI from that perspective, it is an enabler. It is something that should allow us to streamline things like driving screws, but that creativity should not go away. What you're building, that's still a very critical thinking skills. Now, of course, AI can also help with that, can come up with some ideas or suggestions, or maybe even analyze your design and give you some feedback and so on and so forth. But that is still fundamentally a task of a creative, intelligent civilization building entity like a human that could think through, right? Any other assumption outside of that, assuming that a power drill can by itself build a beautiful piece of furniture, I think that's where we get into the territory of that's perhaps not happening today, right? The drill cannot pick itself up and start building stuff, right?
Sure. No, wonderful analogy. Actually, I was taken back to the screw system and all the gears which you mentioned. Now, Ashton, according to you, right, how do you see the Indian startups in India? I mean, the startups in India, as I mentioned, despite the odds and the slow, systems and procedures in India, how are they filling the innovation gap and at India, Ashton?
That's a great point and question. I personally do not have a whole lot of context of experience other than the conversations I've had with people from all ages and all walks of life within the Indian tech community, right? So their feedback has been very much similar to what you told me in terms of constraints and roadblocks and inertia, right? And so that could be resolved through two, in my opinion, paths. One is really nurture and feed the culture of innovation, which means a lot of failures, which means,
Yeah.
thousands of trials and errors until, that one good result comes out. That is something that I think as a society, the entire society needs to get behind. That requires a lot of advocacy, a lot of ambassadorship, a lot of education, a lot of patience, a lot of nurturing. And that may take, 2 or 3 generations to get there, but it's definitely achievable. We have many other cultures that throughout history have achieved that level of innovational confidence, right? So there is no repercussion for failing.
Yeah.
If you're doing your best to make something that's for the betterment of everyone, and if you fail, that's okay. Keep trying, right? So I think that's a cultural aspect, and again, the society can really help with investment, with support, with protection. Everybody gets together and delivers. But then the other side of that is the individuals themselves, or
Yeah.
the organizations and entities themselves. I would say they need to focus on maximizing the most useful output.
Mm.
Focus on maximizing your most useful output. And I'm drawing from the theory of constraints on that for those who've been in maybe software engineering or other realms, that you have heard of theory of constraints, or TOC. And it's a bit of a counterpart to the lean concept, like lean manufacturing, right? One is about efficiency through cost reduction. That's
Yeah.
lean. And theory of constraints is about output maximization. It's
Mm.
about effectiveness or efficacy. So efficiency is very important, but only after you're effective. Trying to make something ineffective super efficient, that really doesn't help, right? First, you want to make sure the thing is effective. You're solving problems that exist, and then make it better and iterate on it.
Mm.
One of the observations I've had around a lot of entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs that I had the pleasure of speaking with is they always wanted to chase somebody else's shiny object, right?
Mm.
Whether it was in um, AR, VR, or cybersecurity, or AI, or whatever
Mm.
the pattern may have been. The thing that was exciting in country X was what they all wanted to do, like crypto mining and so forth.
Yeah.
And my recommendation was, please don't do that, right?
Okay.
Figure out how you, based on your skill set and your abilities, you can put your focus on producing the maximally useful thing that you or your entity can produce for your consumers, right? And if your consumers are local, then focus on solving their needs first before you try to
Go
um,
global.
have a Me Too solution for somewhere, thousands of miles away.
Mm.
Um, the you know it's a moonshot, and moonshots are great, but moonshots are great when you actually have a vehicle to get to the moon, right? If you're just throwing paper airplanes up into the sky, it's probably not a good use of your time or the paper.
Yeah, sure, Ashton. Now, one follow-up question to that, Ashton. Now, we discussed about the hardware talent in India, the AI, and the energy, right? With the intersection of hardware, AI, and energy, which are the emerging opportunities for the Indian startups here in India, Ashton?
Uh, That's a really great call out. I think a truly smart grid infrastructure would be one of the things that I observe in India, like, especially in Bangalore and Hyderabad,
Mm.
um, and everywhere. Actually, it's not just a number of locations, but pretty much everywhere. Mumbai, Delhi, having a smart grid that could be easily configured. You don't need to have massive wires running through the infrastructure and so forth, which again, I think the only way that could be truly achieved is through having localized hydrogen type generators that you can easily bring fuel into cost effectively, and you can just um, network them together and be able to raise infrastructure as you need and scale. Almost like if you think about it in terms of like containers in the
Yeah.
IT realm, like Docker containers. Like think of this as a containerized way of producing your
Mm.
grid, and just
Okay.
microservices equivalent to energy production and grid, right? And that brings with you optimized energy distribution, edge computing capabilities,
Mm.
which again requires innovation, that very cost-effective, purpose-driven hardware that is not wasteful,
Mm.
and it's solving that problem, can be easily sourced and could be easily maintained, and it could be applied to a number of scenarios. And if you take that a step further, you can even think of autonomous energy systems,
Okay.
self-managing
Mm.
renewable energy installations and storage, right? So it could be such that um, again, just using the analogy of something everybody knows, how things work in the cloud, where you can have your automated, your auto scaling up and down of
Mm,
resources, and
mm,
automatic orchestrations of resources, and self-healing built into that, right? So
mm.
that would be another major area. Industrial IoT,
Yeah.
IoT
Okay.
being Internet of Things. So energy efficient sensors and the
Yes.
computing that go along with that for optimization across the board, manufacturing, healthcare,
Healthcare. Okay.
agriculture,
Mm,
any field you can think of. Agricultural technology. Again, agriculture is one of those areas that we've had a lot of um, technology in the petrochemical aspects of it, if you will,
yeah.
since the last 70 or 80 years,
Yeah.
and also quite a bit in the genetic side.
Mm,
And one could argue whether or not those have actually been good or bad, but we haven't had a whole lot of innovation around the intelligent,
mm,
energy efficient, something that actually maximizes the health of the environment type. You probably have heard about, there are a lot of movements now looking at how the ancient times and ancient cultures were taking care of their soil and their ecosystem, and a lot of those practices are making their way back through a number of countries. So
yeah.
that's great, but I think we could take it even a step further and apply some positive technology into speeding that up, making it more universal and more more systematic.
Mm,
And I would also think autonomous vehicles, and by that I don't mean self-driving cars or
yeah.
self-driving taxis. There's so many applications to
Yeah.
an autonomous vehicle, whether it's on water, in land, underwater, under land, or in the air. But
Mm,
there is an incredible amount of possibilities, especially again going back to energy production. If somebody can
mm,
reduce the size of a hydrogen fuel cell and its fuel to make it very efficient and easily accessible, you can now imagine a massive, scalable, massive fleet of different types of hydrogen powered vehicles that could be revolutionizing how transportation is thought of and done. And last but not least, pollutant capture, right? Pollutant from the water supplies, from the air, from, you know,
right.
PFAS is a global problem. Forever chemicals are now global problems.
Mm,
And plastics and microplastics and nanoplastics are now global problems. And I think this is another amazing area for the the great entrepreneurs and scientists and engineers in India to think about producing those highly scalable, globally relevant, cost-effective, hardware and technology to solve that. And by the way, when I say hardware, I'm not talking about like silicon dioxide,
mm,
chipsets. I just want to be very clear. Hardware could be anything that's literally, hardware.
mm,
Um, and and um, and potentially also revolutionize how we can approach our mounting pollutants
mm.
challenges.
Oh, no, thanks. Thanks for sharing that, Ashton. Wonderful
Of course.
perspective. Ashton, we have coming to the end of our podcast, and I have a second last question for you, which I asked to most of our guests. So I want to understand what is your, how do you keep yourself abreast? I'm sure you're so inquisitive, you're so curious. But which are the different books, are or the audiobooks, or the blogs that you read, Ashton? And how is your lifestyle? I mean, you're a early day person or a late night person, Ashton?
That's a great question. Biologically, I'm definitely a night owl. I do my best
Okay,
thinking and creative stuff pretty late at night, early into the day. But
okay,
um, and that goes back from my days of coding as a kid, and you would start in a coding project and it wouldn't end sometimes for 30 or 40 hours nonstop. But that being said, that's really not a very sustainable thing. So I try to do a more balanced approach to things. So have certain things done in the morning, but then I still think my most creative time of the day is later at night when everything's nice and quiet and I can think. And as far as books go, you know, I don't think I have the I don't think I have the luxury to sit down and read a whole book. I would love to, but I usually tend to just jump into a chapter, jump into a particular segment and try to digest that. Even within a book, go back and forth. So I'm more looking at content for reference as opposed to try to just read it end to end. And that also means that articles actually tend to be better for me because articles tend to be more concise. And also the other concern I have is traditionally for a book, by the time this book is published, and because I'm have always been passionate about the technology and latest and greatest, unless I'm going back to the fundamentals, unless I'm going back to concepts that have been around for decades and are probably not going to change, I'd rather just read the latest publication that comes out of a group or a place that I feel like they've done some really great innovation in the past and they're going to continue to do great work. And I try to also mix that with the type of innovation that doesn't make it into publications. And those you will find usually in just random sources on the online forum of all shapes and form, or somebody writes an article about something, and then I start scratching the surface and find out this person has written, half a dozen or maybe more, and every single one of them are just incredibly useful, powerful. And then I communicate with them. I write them emails or connect and get their thoughts. So this way, I'm getting my own individualized articles, if you will, from them. A few paragraphs at a time.
Wow, wonderful. So, which is that? Is there any particular site where you look for such articles, Ashton, or it's just
It just happens to wherever it is.
okay?
I use Gemini to help me.
Okay.
Gemini has an amazing ecosystem around now with agentic agent space that helps me even mine for more data in a much more efficient way that I used to. And there's also another feature related to that. It's called Notebook LM that is a great place for me to curate all of my favorite content.
Yeah.
So I can create a different notebook for a different topic. Let's say like hydrogen, right?
Yeah.
I literally have one around hydrogen production. I have another one about hydrogen infrastructure and hydrogen regulations and legal aspects and so forth, right? Because one of my backgrounds also was being a lawyer. So, I always want to look at the legal ramifications and liability and so on and so forth. And so I have different notebooks, and each one is curated with my favorite articles, and I kind of hand curate those things to make sure that they stay relevant and only have the most quality content to help my AI ecosystem to answer questions for me. And then that becomes my reference. So if I have a question,
Yeah.
then I quickly ask it, and I get exactly the answer that I would have gotten by spending hours going through those myself and like highlighting them and taking notes.
In fact, we are using Google LM. It's fantastic, Ashton. We are converting a podcast into a kind of book. It's
Yeah,
really fantastic, actually. I'm able to relate, the Google LM aspect which you mentioned, Ashton. Sure.
outstanding. Wonderful.
Thanks. Now, the last question, Ashton. One actionable principle that you would advise to our viewers, the innovators, and the tech startup founders
Mhm.
out there, Ashton.
Hmm. The hard part is just having one, right? There could be so many.
Okay.
Um, I would probably repeat something I said a bit earlier, which is focus on maximizing your most useful output, right? So I don't want to break it apart because
Mm.
it's a pretty short sentence, but
Yeah.
every word is purposeful. One is focus. It's really hard to focus. If you're a
Yeah.
creative person, if you're entrepreneurial, it's really, really difficult to stay focused. We always want to chase after something that looks amazing and we think we can do it all. I've written a LinkedIn article that I call it the 220 rule.
Okay.
And the 220 rule, I learned it from a wonderful expert from Harvard who was given a talk once at one of our previous companies. And those weren't her exact words, but that's what I walked away with, and I kind of formulated my own 220, which is take
Yeah.
20 of the
Okay.
things, top 20 of the things that you absolutely want to do or you have to do,
Okay.
and then purposefully put 18 of them aside and say you will not do those things. You will not
Oh,
do those things, and only focus on two.
for how
So
many
that's
hours?
the 220 rule.
Okay. For how many
So
hours?
so that So that depends on your scenario. That could be for your week, that could be for your month, that could be
Mm.
for your quarter, that could be for your year, right? And it's very difficult to do. I don't want to, but that's what
Very
successful
difficult
people
to do
do.
because everything is important, Ashton.
And I hate to say it, but this is the example that the person who gave a talk used. And at first I think it sounds a little bit controversial, but thinking about it, it's true. It's like she said on my 220 list, sometimes it could be that I'm going to ignore my mother.
Mm.
I love her. I want to spend time with her, but I'm not going to be able to multitask of taking care of my child and my mother at the same time in that week or in that month. So, she goes into, and when I heard that, it was a fairly kind of a pattern shattering thought. But then if you think about, if you look at the daily patterns of some of the most successful people that we admire, whether they're most amazing mathematicians or scientists or entrepreneurs or world peace advocates and so forth. That's exactly what they do. They become so focused on just that one or two things they do really well, and it comes at the expense of everything and everybody else. But that's what it takes, right? Um, so the 220 is very effective. It's not easy to do, but it is definitely one of those things that I try to, on a daily basis, have a to-do list. I have 20 things, man, 20 things that I must do or I would love to do, or both. But I am intentionally going not to do 18 of them because then I can at least get two things done really well for that day, right? Otherwise, I'm going to do 20 things and none of them are going to be done well. And the next day, I have 40 things now I need to do because I didn't
Mm.
finish the 20 things from the previous cycle, right? So that's focus. Focus is
Yeah.
very difficult, very important, and I would use the 220 rule. Maximizing your most useful output is another thing, but how do you maximize something? Maximizing could be whatever your metric for success is. If
Mm.
maximizing is getting something out to the people who are going to use it, your time to value faster, well, then maximize that. If it's about quality, then it's not about getting something out fast. It's about getting the best thing you possibly could. Your best painting, your best furniture making, your best
Mm.
cake, your best robot, right? Your best software. Then you maximize that quality, right? Or whatever it ends up being. And your most useful,
Mm.
the thing that you are able to produce that's useful to others, not
Yeah.
something that somebody else does really well. And then, my most useful output is probably not going to be, um, a photorealistic painting. I'm not a photorealist, a painting type. So
Okay.
no matter how much of my focus I may put behind that, I'm not going to be able to produce work that is going to compete with people who are really good at that. So it's really important to be very pragmatic and honest in terms of what your individual most useful
Mm.
thing is, and then put your focus on maximizing that thing in whatever your timeline is, in a day, in a year, in 10 years, in a lifetime. It all depends.
Sure, sure. No, I understand the game is on the focus, and I'll try to follow that. I know it'll be a little difficult, but let me give you the feedback and as to how I'm able to adhere to it. Sure, Ashton.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful, and I know we are overshooting the time. So I really looking forward to be in touch with you and invite you in more podcasts. I think it can go like a series, Ashton.
I would love that. I'm honored and absolutely. And I would love to get some feedback from your listeners as well. And I'd love to hear their thoughts and make it time delayed but interactive, and also any particular topics that would like to have a deeper dive on and a discussion on, because I learn as much as everybody else does in these conversations. Even though I'm doing most of the talking,
Yeah,
it really helps me also learn about the latest and greatest. And if I get things wrong, please do call it out, because that's how we learn, right? By constantly questioning our assumptions and what we think we know, and seeking the most correct and the most complete information that we can gather. So really looking
yeah.
forward to ongoing conversations and dialogues in this.
Absolutely, Ashton. So, viewers, please put down your comments in the comment section below. The topics that you want to discuss, some of the interesting, next interesting, wave of disruption, either in the tech, either the hardware tech or the AI. Please put it in the comment section below. Sure, Ashton. Thank you so much again, and thank you. I'm looking forward to host you again, Ashton.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure, and have a great morning and evening, everyone, and we'll chat soon.
Thank you.